So I'm excited to announce or to get started. Mike Vasquez is going to be kicking us off and walking us through the process of how to order your first additive part, specifically thinking about like vendor selections, settings, part quality, with the aim of really building out that network that you have at the finger at your fingers. Um, I'll go ahead and hand it off to Mike. Thanks for having us here, Mike.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So if you attended the first webinar a few weeks ago, uh, we'll kind of keep this in a similar vein, or if you have questions or if you have comments or things like that throughout the time, just let me know and feel free to interrupt or um, throw something in the chat and I'll see it and take a look at that. So the aim for today, I'll talk for about kind of in the ballpark of like 35 minutes, but I only have a handful of slides, and really what I want to kind of work through is a few tangible examples of going on to some different vendor websites, go through the process of actually ordering a part, seeing kind of how that works. There's not there's a lot of details in it. It's not too hard to get started, but there's some nuances that I think hopefully I'll illuminate as we go. And so, um, hopefully this is kind of more interactive and we'll record the entire screen. So if you want to kind of follow this model and kind of go back to it, that'll be available as well. So, just a bit of background. So my name is Mike Vasquez, based here in South Bend at Innovation Park. And I've been in the additive manufacturing space for about kind of going on kind of 13 years now. I'm a materials engineer by background and did studied at MIT and then did a PhD focused on developing materials for production 3D printing. So I've had a lot of experience running machines. I've set up probably close to a dozen production facilities around the country, even some globally, and can talk, have kind of interacted in a variety of industries, using many different materials, many different types of printers, and kind of understanding that business case. So the aim today is really to talk about kind of the context of kind of what does it look like when you have kind of some in-house capability to do prototyping. You probably see a little bamboo printer like many of you have uh, in your facility. What happens when that isn't good enough, or you need more parts, or you need better materials, or you need a different material than you have available? Kind of, you don't want to have to go out and buy a new part or buy a new printer or kind of experiment with new materials. What are the options available? So really, that's going to be kind of the context of this and how we get started. And then we'll get into some more detail about what are the different types of these companies. Are basically kind of, think of them as contract manufacturers in the additive manufacturing space. Basically, they're called service bureaus, and as you can imagine, there's a lot of them, but they all have kind of some different focus areas, different technologies, and I'll go through that. So at the end of this, you'll have a list of like, hey, what was that company that Mike mentioned? There'll be a full list in the slides that you can have access to, as well as I'll kind of actually take a 3D printed part from kind of a digital file. I'll go through a couple different websites and how that works in terms of ordering a part and what you might want to think about, what I look for in terms of partners and vendors, and that'll be kind of the crux of it, as well as some discussion about how I think about cost considerations, kind of kind of buy something internal versus use kind of an external vendor, and we'll get into those details as well. So before I begin, I did add a specific slide, and Michael, feel free to add any context if you want. But this webinar and the one before on metal 3D printing are part of an overall program that we're partnering with industry labs at Notre Dame, called the AM Accelerator, or Additive Manufacturing Accelerator, with the aim to kind of engage the region in this technology, kind of showcase some of the opportunities that are available. And over the next several months, and we started this kind of late this summer, kind of do a variety of events, educational kind of touch points like this, and also in-person engagement and kind of practical demonstrations and actually going through this sort of kind of curated process of identifying some parts internally for customers in the region or companies in the region and kind of help them walk through the process. So if you're interested in getting involved with that, we certainly can share some more details. But just to kind of give a recap, so over the last few months, we've engaged close to 10 companies. We've gone on site with several of them, kind of walked their manufacturing floor, looked at opportunities where they may be already using 3D printing or areas where they may think that it might be useful. We'll bring our own expertise and say like, hey, that could be a really interesting use case. We'll kind of step away and go and kind of get some parts procured and some example materials that they can use, so they can explore the technology a bit more. We've done a day tour up to Grand Rapids with a number of those companies to look at facilities that actually have the machines in house and what are some of the ways that they've interacted with the technology. And we continue to do these webinars as well as in the spring. There'll be a kind of a half day, full day type of kind of symposium, kind of meeting, kind of bringing the group of AM participants and other leaders around the country together to have a discussion. So that'll be one of the next things we're planning. But if you're interested in getting involved and want to talk more about that, or get in touch with myself or Michael, and we can kind of help talk through that. So we've worked with companies that are in the injection molding space and are building out, thinking about different tooling approaches. We've worked with folks that are looking at metal technology. So it's not, I'll talk about polymer stuff today and some metal stuff, but really across the board in terms of material types and industries that we've already started to work with here. So
And I
feel
would
free to.
think, thanks for plugging that, Mike. And I would just say that like it's for anything, anywhere we're along that adoption map that you're thinking of. If it's a where do I get started? We're here to help and think about what parts, what processes could make sense. And then if you're pretty serious down the line of, hey, I know I really want to do this. I know that I've been considering this. We can help with the vendor analysis and getting some sample parts in from different manufacturers to really get a non-sales approach of what's out there in the market. Our goal is to help remove those barriers for adoption. And if that means, hey, maybe this process isn't right for me, that for my product, we want to help you get there fast. But we also want to help you think about maybe that this technology is a fit. We're here to help. So if we haven't had a conversation yet, please hit Mike, send an email over to Mike or myself. Would love to explore your product, your process, and see if additive's a good fit. So thanks for making sure we're aware of that, Mike.
Yep. And so kind of back to the focus of the day, which will be on kind of how do we think about ordering AM parts and kind of what the opportunities are there. Four things I'm going to cover today. So we could spend kind of half a day on doing this, but I think we'll cover the highlights today. So you can kind of get off and running if you wanted to this afternoon, go and order your own parts. So I'll talk about kind of what you need to get started, so the service bureau types, and then kind of get into the demo. But the first thing, kind of the basics of what you'll need to get started is really some sort of 3D model of a part. Really, you want to think about something that is, at first instance, kind of an individual part. So something like, if you can see, like an individual component, right? Whether it's a tooling component, whether it's a fixture, whether it's end use part, what you'll need is kind of a CAD file that you can then convert into a step or a .stl file. So that'll be like the part1.stl or part1.step. So if you or your designers have something like that, that's all you need to get really started in terms of getting accurate quotes and kind of looking through the opportunity available. So that's basic thing number one that you'll need. Then kind of getting into more the details of, hey, what do you expect the material to be made out of? Do you have a desired material? Or are you looking for something that's exactly made out of the same thing? Is it PA6? Is it polypropylene? Is it aluminum? What do you need the functionality of the part to do? Is it a prototype first run? Are you looking to replace a production part? Or is it just a tooling component where you just need something flat um, and accurate? And then kind of other things like how many do you need and what's your lead time and all that fun stuff. So that'll kind of give the bounding box of kind of what you want to get started. And then oftentimes I use some of these kind of service bureaus as for a couple different reasons. One is if I need like a quick turn prototype and something I don't have in-house, usually lead time somewhere around a week, week and a half, generally, right? I need something quick or fairly quick that I don't want to go cut a tool or I don't want to have to go out and do another machine shop or something, or in-house production is backed up. That's usually where we start from there. Um, Another kind of big case that I see a lot is, hey, we've got our own kind of internal capacity to do some 3D printing or some kind of quick turn prototyping or tooling or something like that. But the material that we have is not meeting kind of our requirements, right? We may have access to some basic PLA or ABS type of material, but it's the mechanical properties, the surface finish, the flatness may not be good enough for what we're looking to do. Um, and then you can go all the way to, hey, I need a production partner, right? We're actually working with a company right now that um, on they're in automotive space is kind of for our kind of main day job is they're they have a big maintenance and sustainment effort where they have a lot of aftermarket parts that normally they make kind of a few thousand that they sell over 5 years, right? And so for them to go cut an $80,000 metal injection metal injection molding tool, it's going to cost them tens of thousands of dollars. They don't have to do that every time they need just 3 or 4 a year. So they are looking for folks that could be a production partner to say, hey, we're going to go through the relevant PPAP and qualification process with you guys for this AM process, and you're going to be our contract manufacturer. And so there are opportunities to do that as well, not just quick turn prototypes, but kind of using a vendor specifically to do end use production. So that's kind of the breadth of it. So that's a wide swath, but we'll kind of get into some of those details as well. And so this is more for reference, but I'll kind of talk through. I'm not going to talk through everybody, but I'll just kind of highlight a few of them. And I think feel free to use this as more of a reference that you can have in thinking through kind of what options are out there. Obviously, Google or ChatGPT will get you some of these as well, but these are some that I've used in the past and or have kind of been in contact with for other efforts. And so at the top is more kind of the Xometry Proto Labs, which I'll go through in a second. Those are broader, kind of big net type of quick turn prototypes. They're more Xometry for sure. They actually don't own any of their equipment, so they're more of an aggregator. And so you imagine there's a whole network of people with 3D printers across the country. Many of them aren't using them to full capacity. And so what Xometry does is basically you put up your model and they kind of farm it out to the lowest bidder, so to speak, of like, hey, like Jeff in Seattle has some extra capacity and is willing to do this part, and has the right material and right finishing capabilities. And so they'll kind of be a matchmaker for that. But you would interact with Xometry, which I'll show you as kind of your first step. It's likely going to be the cheapest out there or pretty close to the cheapest, but it's not something that you would necessarily use for full production, because you might put your part up today and then, hey, I need to reorder that in a month. You'd put it back up. You're not going to get the same vendor more likely than not. So there's going to be some differences, and it could be in surface finish or quality or even how they print the part and orientation and things like that. So,
So,
um,
Mike, I'd encourage everyone to ask questions along the way,
yeah,
either through the messages or just go ahead and go on mute. I did have a question on that. Do you know after you submit a part to Xtrometry if who that vendor was that fulfilled it? It was Jeff in Seattle or
no,
Bob from Texas, so you don't know.
no, because they don't want you then to just go to them directly, right? That would defeat their
Yeah.
business model. So, you could probably find out if the industry is not huge, but but I think then there are a lot of these companies. I mean, some of the Grand Rapids companies that we went to may supplement some of their workflow with
Mhm.
that, but generally you don't. More companies that are directed like into the production avenue, like the Xstalls and Forecast 3D, Forerunner 3D. Those are small businesses that have 3 to 5 printers and are making probably several thousand parts a year. You'd go to them and you can kind of work with them directly if you want some more bespoke requirements, or you just want to know your supplier more. I would say Xometry, Proto Labs, those are like, hey, I want a cheap prototype. I want to use my credit card and not do a PO and just get this ordered this afternoon type of thing. I don't need to talk to somebody to talk about surface finish or will these features come out in the print. So
So I see that there's a wide range of certifications for some of these partners. For this one specifically, as they're not the one actually manufacturing the part, are they all ITAR registered, or do you have to specify that when
yeah, and
uploading?
we'll go in the demo on that. So it's basically like think of it as like a menu, right? It's like I need a I need 5 of these parts. I need it out of a specific material that you designate. It's ITAR. And so basically it's filtering. Xometry is filtering its list
Gotcha.
of vendors. And then also the price changes with that, right? So,
Thanks, Mike.
yep. Yeah, and so others on here kind of mentioned the next batch, the Xstall Forecast 3D and things like that. Those are more like I don't call them mom and pop service bureaus, but they're 3D printed focused contract manufacturers that you can kind of go to directly for projects. Um, Orlicon, Encodema, ATI, those are on the metal side. That's mainly their focus. So if you need metal parts in aluminum and steel or nickel superalloys, things like that, those are a few of the companies that have large fleets of metal 3D printers. Centavia as well on that side. Um, and then I think the other thing to kind of keep in mind, and I often, when I go to the demo, I'll kind of talk to you about like different ways you can use these websites. But um, in most of these cases, so if you go to a 3D printing trade show or you see some of the machine manufacturers that are producing the types of parts that or materials that you're interested in, often if you reach directly out to them, the machine manufacturers will also do some level of first article production, kind of prototyping with you as well. Um, Obviously, they're kind of more marching down towards, hey, do you want to buy a machine? But they realize as well that, hey, not everyone has $500,000 or $1 million to kind of produce or to bring something in house. So oftentimes you can work with them directly to say like, hey, we're kind of exploring this. Will you help us by producing some of these initial parts? So if you know of a machine vendor that you're interested in, um, but they don't show up on some of these lists of service bureaus, you can often go directly to them. And some companies even have set up their own production environments where they can um, like Stratasys Direct Manufacturing. That's a separate company from Stratasys, who you may know as a 3D printing kind of machine manufacturer. But they're down in Texas and they have printers of all shapes and sizes, not just Stratasys. And they could be a partner producing parts. So, um, as well. So that's kind of the flavor of the different types of service bureaus. Feel free to use this list. This is just kind of an overview of some of them. Um, and if you have any questions on that, just reach out. And so now I'm going to go to the actual demo and kind of walk you guys through that. Um, so just want to make sure you guys can see my browser, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. So this is Xometry. So xometry.com. You'll have to kind of create um, it's easiest if you just create a username and password. I'll, they are annoying in the sense that if you just use it to browse, which I do sometimes, is they'll email you and follow up like, hey, like you didn't finish your quote, things like that. So it's a little annoying that way, but it's a good kind of way to start in the process because I think their website is fairly easy to navigate and looks very similar to others that I'll end up showing. So I'm just going to start a new quote. Like you'll have your dashboards of quotes and things like that, and kind of what those look like. But basically, here's kind of I'm going to cancel this for a second. So it's easy to drag and drop a file. So as I mentioned, here are the file types that you would need. So a step file, a SolidWorks file, an STL. These are all things that will go into the browser and be able to kind of see what that looks like. So I just dropped in an STL from one of our partner companies. And it'll ask like, hey, are any of these export control? No. Some of these companies got into trouble because they were uh, producing parts they weren't supposed to, or people in different regions. So you imagine, hey, I'm like, this is an open website, right? So if I'm a defense contractor and I need a part made and I drop into Xometry, they could ship it overseas to somewhere where that's not supposed to have that part. So that's why you have to check that. They got some of these companies got sued for that. But I don't know if Xometry specifically, but there were some others in the space that got into trouble. So that's why you have to click that button. But basically, what happens? It's pretty straightforward, right? So what you'll pop up with is here's an image of your part. I'll go into kind of editing the configuration, but you've got kind of price and lead time if it's made in the US, if it's made internationally. You've got all of kind of the details of shipping and things like that. You can change quantities um, and there, but that gives you kind of an instant quote, right? Obviously, we'll start to change some of the details, but one thing that is always good to check in this because you're just taking oftentimes kind of um, it's not necessarily a full CAD measured component. Sometimes the units get wonky, and so in some cases, I've seen like you drop your part in and it's like, hey, like they're unable to quote it, right? Because it looks like it's instead of 1 inch by um, 2 inches, it's 1 foot by 2 feet, right? And it won't fit into any printer. And so, like, hey, what happened there? And sometimes you just want to make sure that your dimensions are right. So have an idea of kind of what you should expect that to be when you're going in. And then into the dirty details, this is where you'll end up kind of looking at kind of some of the configurations for materials and machines and things like that. So up here, right, is a nice uh, and most of these I'm not advocating for Xometry. I'm just using this as like an example. Most of these kind of browsers look the exact same. I'll show you Forecast 3D. It looks almost the exact same, but it kind of gives you a flow. But you can start to see like, hey, if I order one, it's going to be $40. But if I order two, I can get basically two for the price of one, right? And you start to get economies of scale, especially depending on what type of printing process you pick. And so oftentimes, so Xometry has a pretty wide selection of machines and materials. Um, and so you can um, start by selecting which process you want. Do you want metal or do you want plastic, right? And so we're just going to go on plastic on this side. There's a bunch of different types of plastic printing types. So this is where you may have to play around a little bit. Generally on the thermoplastic side, this is where if you just have internal to your facility, if you just have like an FDM bamboo or something like that, probably where you want to play is the some of the thermoplastic powder material machines like a HP multi-jet fusion or selective laser sintering, things like that. That's going to give you a little bit better quality and more robust part properties. So I'm just going to select there. But if we were to kind of go back and say, I want this in metal, um, we can, do we want a binder jet process? Do we want a direct metal laser sintering process? We talked a little bit about that in the webinar before about what those mean. But and then you can go down and say, I want this in steel or something like that. So, and then obviously the price changes based on that. Um, so I'm going to go back to plastic. And the one thing that I would do, especially as you are getting familiar with the technology, is like it doesn't, if you spend a half hour looking at this and changing the boxes and things like that, you'll learn a lot about kind of pricing structure and how the contextually like the materials relate to each other. Um, and so I think that's something that I'd recommend doing, especially if you're kind of if you're the one person tasked in your company about like, hey, you should be the 3D printing guru and go and look at this. I think just learning and kind of going through and checking kind of what the pricing and what the options look like is very informative and doesn't take long, right? Like a lot of times with manufacturing parts, you need quotes. Like quotes will take a few days or even a week or so. With this, it's all instant, right? So like it happens and you can see the updates. Um, so I'm gonna go with a nylon 12 material. If you want this and other websites, you can learn about the other materials and you can see the spec sheets. This is what it would look like. It's kind of an as gray printed or as printed gray material. You can get them dyed as well. It it's easy to get them dyed in this case. Like all they're doing is putting it into, I don't know if you guys have seen like RIT t-shirt dye, RIT, that you can get at Walgreens or Target. They do like tie dye. That's basically all they're doing is dipping it into a bath of that. So if you really need it black but don't want to pay for it, that's another way to do that. But if you don't want the hassle, you can get it in black. And then there's a number of different kind of options in terms of post finishing, right? You can just have standard. There's some stuff called vapor smoothing. This is process specific, right? And do you need tapped holes or threads? Are there any inserts? And things like that. That will all kind of go into kind of how much it costs, right? If you start to say this needs to be tapped and I need these three areas tapped and or inserts and things like that, it kind of goes into the details of your part. Obviously, you have inspection. Do you just need standard inspection? Someone will look at it and it's like, hey, it looks right. Throw it in the bag and throw it in the box. Do you need CMM or something like that? And then there's other certifications or things that you might want to pick here, and that'll just point it to a different vendor, right? And so from there, right, then can go back and say, okay, I want 410 or whatever it may be, and you can start to kind of see what that looks like for bulk quantities. And so this is where like very easy to start to kind of assess like, hey, I need this material, or I need two different types of material. Super easy to kind of go through this process. And then if you want, right, I can save this and I can go to checkout, right? So it's like any other e-commerce site. So in 7 minutes there, I was able to kind of go and get a part ordered and it can be here next week. And so that's kind of the concept for this. I'll go over to Another kind of vendor forecast 3D, the same type of idea. So I can upload a model. Um, where to get? Oops. Uh, there we go. And so this is just a different vendor, but as you'll see, it looks very much the same um, as it goes. So I should have pre-uploaded this, but yeah. So you'll see kind of you can open it in the viewer. It'll look the same because it's the same model. You can like, hey, yeah, that looks right. Um, and then you can get in the details of kind of configuration, right? Of up here, you can say, I need this in aluminum or nylon or whatever it may be, and they'll kind of start to do direct quotes. And so this one's a little bit different, where instead of like having to go through and select every single material and do that individually change, you can go down and say like, okay, hey, it's going to cost like they'll get direct quoted for aluminum, but if I wanted in FDM or nylon or ABS, you can just see the pricing right away. And that's with little configuration, but it's the same idea. So you can start to filter by your materials and machine types. You can even compare like, hey, what does Xometry charge for the same configuration versus like um, versus what we saw in Xometry. So like these two are the kind of same configurations, about $24 here, and I forget what it was on here. So if it's $10 each at higher quantities, but if we're only ordering a handful, it's a little bit more expensive. So, but kind of gives you an idea of what you're doing. So not only can you like you may be familiar with other ones like Proto Labs, you can't you can do other things like CNC machining or produce like injection mold and things like that. So these are probably you may already be familiar with this from other traditional standpoints, but you kind of get a sense of it's not super difficult to kind of get started with the infrastructure. More kind of the nuance comes of like, hey, there's a lot of options here. There's a lot of materials. There's a lot of technologies. That's where if you're interested, we can help in terms of like, hey, I've got this part. I'm looking for it to be smooth, and it doesn't have to be super mechanically strong, but we want it somewhat strong. That's where we can start to help some of that. So, wanted to kind of give you a flavor of what that looks like. The last thing I'll kind of show in this, and then I'll kind of open it up for questions, is how I start to think about some of the pricing or use this data to then think about kind of buying or kind of outsourcing the technology, either through kind of in-house production or kind of going to something like an injection molding part. So what I have here, and happy to go through this in more detail. I want to leave some time for questions, but one thing we often get asked for is like, hey, when does it make sense to use a vendor like what I showed, or someone that is in with the idea of like using 3D printing for production versus kind of going to an injection molded part or cutting a tool for that. So what I've done is kind of create a cost calculator to say, okay, hey, if we're under 5,000 or under 2,500 parts, it probably makes more sense to use 3D printing. But once we get over that number with the cost of the tool and the kind of fixed cost per part of 3D printing, then it becomes kind of a losing venture. So just to walk through this in terms of my thinking, and there's more to go into on this, and I don't want to kind of bore you on a holiday after or on a Halloween afternoon of the gory details, but essentially when you think about 3D printing, yes, what I showed, kind of there are cost breaks for parts, but once you get over 10 or 15, there's not that, it's fairly flat. And it does, because you're not making a tool every time, that's kind of the price is the price. And so whether you make 50 parts or 1,000 parts or 15,000 parts, generally the price stays about the same in terms of 3D printing. That differs from something like an injection molding if you're in the plastic space where you have to make the tool, and then, hey, the tool costs a lot of money. $20,000 or 50 or 80, whatever it may be. But in order to get those kind of economies of scale, you have to make a lot of parts. And for the first part, it's going to be the tool plus whatever the material cost is. So it's a lot of money. But as you go higher and higher, then you get down to kind of where you see the benefit. And so there's kind of that sweet spot with 3D printing to say, okay, hey, for this part, we can think about this as a viable cost technology up to about 2,000 components or 5,000 or whatever it may be, depending on your kind of overall existing manufacturing cost. So that's how I start to think about this, and where you can start to bring in data from the 3D printing, these quoting services, or get parts produced, but also kind of use it to inform your own internal capacity for thinking about alternative manufacturing pathways. So wanted to just touch on that because I think it can be helpful, especially as you're talking about cost or thinking about repair parts or tooling or things like that. So happy to talk more about that, but wanted to certainly leave some time at the end here, to talk about a few other things, and then also leave some time for questions. So I'm going to go back to my slides and kind of wrap up here with that, which I kind of just talked about. So just as I mentioned, so orange, just so you can see this better, orange is that injection molding cost. So for lower volumes, the per part cost is going to be more expensive, right? Because you have to amortize the tool. For 3D printing, it's kind of fixed. And so there's this crossover point usually at some point with that'll start to make sense for lower volume production. Um, so my contact information is here. I think the slides will be sent out. Obviously, this will be on YouTube, or on kind of a link will be set out as well. So feel free to reach out to me if you need anything. Phone or text or email is fine. But I wanted to turn it over to Michael for a few other quick highlights as well,
Yeah.
before we wrap up.
Thanks, Mike, for going over that overview. It would be, I also wanted to plug some of the resources that we have at Notre Dame. We use those same sites that Mike shared. I would say that like inside the university, we have quite a bit of like FDM and some resin printers here locally. But I know most of the folks on the call also have FDM printers, bamboos, Stratuses, at your facility. So there's two main labs on campus that we use. It's Innovation Lab and Engineering Innovation Hub. If you'd like a tour, would love to provide you one of those. Innovation Lab is really in the market. If that's your one part, or if you're thinking about how do maybe there's an opportunity for doing larger volumes too. Innovation Lab would be that source. Predominantly, they're focused in on those FDM bamboo printers that you see in the middle. They have over a dozen of those right next door. And then on the next slide, we have the EIH. They have a more wide range of different printing capabilities. Mike, if you can go to the next page, they have FDM printers and resin, but they get into a lot of different types of different components, composites in that, and you can see in those material selection. And on the right hand side, you can see the wide range of capability. I would encourage you to think about the EIH as if you have a one-time part, but they may be the right partner in the FDM type of space. But really where I see other partners have leveraged them is, hey, come talk to somebody before you pull the plug, before you pull the trigger, sorry, on buying one of these printers. Come see how it has held up in a lab environment. I'll tell you, at the end of semesters, they're running almost nonstop 24/7. So they get pretty abused, and uh, the EIH has some good stories on where they've started purchasing equipment and then where they've shifted over time. But those are two resources. Would love to give a tour, give if you have a sample part, but predominantly they're in the FDM space. And happy to talk more about that beyond what Mike has shared about kind of like the global vendors that give you a much wider variety, and sometimes, and most of the time, will get you more to a production ready feeling part over some of these FDMs. So I'll pause there. Really appreciate all your time, and I know there will be a bunch of people watching this offline as well. Is there any questions from the folks that are on the call today?